Today I'm going to take you to explore San Clemente, this wonderful medieval church, and we'll go down below to the earlier levels all the way back to the 1st century AD and this temple of Mithras. Hey, today I want to take you inside and under San Clemente. It really is one of my favorite places to go. I've done shows here, but it's a personal thing. It's a clear way to understand the layers of history, that Rome is literally one city on top of another. We can start with the Imperial city. We can start with a house that also has a Mithraeum. Over top, there's going to be a house that becomes a house church, that becomes the first version of San Clemente of the 5th century. And then on top, we've got this magnificent church of the 12th century with incredible mosaics, incredible cosmotess floors. We see the layers of history of Rome from the end of the 1st century AD. We go into the 4th and 5th centuries AD with that early church that lives a long life until the early 11th century. And then we get this magnificent church on top, which still stands today. The layers of history, let's explore under San Clemente. San Clemente Church is located in a valley in the Kylian Hill district, and its Irish Dominicans began to investigate and excavate the church toward the end of the 19th century. And what a discovery they made. We can descend today to the early church and then again down another staircase to the ancient layers of Rome, 11 meters beneath the modern pavement. The level we're going to explore includes a domus of the late 1st century AD and an adjacent warehouse or horreum. And the real standout feature in this house is a subterranean triclinium hall whose walls were blocked in and benches were added to convert this space into a cave-like space, into a Mithraeum for the worship of the god Mithras in the 2nd century AD. He was popular with the military, and you have this altar in the center for the worshipers who are reclining on benches with shelves for food to be distributed by slaves. And you see the main act of Mithras killing a bull. The blood is splattering. This on one side of an altar, which was dedicated by Gaius Arrius Claudianus. And on the other side of the altar, we have Caltes with the torch up and Caltapes with the torch down, and finally even a snake. So there are great symbols that are involved with the worship of this deity, very, very popular in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. There are other spaces in the house that are also going to be decorated at this time. And we have a series of rooms then where benches are also added. This particular room is known as the Schola, or the school for the worshippers of Mithras. We don't really know what's going on here, but we do know there's a big overhaul of this house in the 2nd century AD. I can take you and show you things that you didn't even know existed. I want to take you to places that you know and show you things you never even thought of. So reach out to me with questions in the comments. You can write to me directly. If you want to do something private, some excursions, you let me know. And of course, I offer through the American Institute for Roman Culture, Ancient Rome Live courses. You can join me in Rome, Italy, and throughout the empire. Now we're going to leave the domus and we're going to pass over into the remains of the horreum. Not entirely excavated, but we can see a series of rooms which would have originally faced an open courtyard, which has not been excavated. So we're passing from the domus here, we're passing through a narrow alleyway and now transitioning through a huge wall, which has been partially removed to allow us access now into this horreum space. What was stored here, we don't know. But this was an enormous enterprise. Some scholars want to associate it with the mint, which we know was somewhere in the neighborhood. But the thing is, the mint was going on in use far beyond the use of this particular warehouse. And we know that natural springs flowed, we can see them right here, that caused quite a bit of difficulty for the excavators. But you can connect to the natural features of Rome and the water when you explore this amazing warehouse. And we can admire the building techniques, we can admire the herringbone brick, and of course we can see the planks where the concrete was set into them to create the vaulting. So this is a warehouse with a long life, and even the floor that you walk on is secondary. There are lots of transitions. So we make our way through this horreum, and we're going to make our way up on top to the next layer of San Clemente. This is probably the area that's the most difficult to understand, because this earlier church, which dates to the 5th century, is actually taking over a house in the 4th century, which was occupying the domus, but also now covering over the remains of the horreum that was filled in. And that is then the location of the first church of San Clemente. And if we look around, we can see some of the decoration from that original house converted into this early church right here. But as we walk around the site of San Clemente, in use from the 5th century all the way to its abandonment in the 11th, we see various uses of fresco decoration, but we also see reused sarcophagi from the pagan period. So it's quite extraordinary. Look at this Mary of the 8th century. She looks like a Byzantine princess. So we've got early decorations, and then we have, for the grand nave and its columns, a difficult kind of understanding what's going on here, because over time, the spaces between the columns are going to be filled in, and some of them will be decorated. Then this church is abandoned, and then you have a whole series of piers that are inserted by the excavators of the 19th century. So this layer doesn't collapse. It makes for a very difficult understanding of the entire space. But what we do have here is a series of 11th century frescoes that show miracles associated with Clemens. And who was Clemens? He was the 4th Pope of Rome, exiled to the Crimea. He was killed by being thrown into the sea with an anchor, and that is the symbol of his martyrdom. And we have a number of frescoes that show those miracles associated directly with Clemens. And what do they date to? They date to the 11th century. It's these frescoes that can't be reused in the church up above when this church is abandoned. So this is the true treasure that we get. And we see right here a miracle associated. There's the anchor. It's associated with the miracle of Clemens. And we have the dedicator of the 11th century with his children, and one of his children's name is Clemens. Here we have the returning of the remains, the relics of the body of Clemens, brought by Slavic saints Methodius and Cyrillus into this very church in which we're actually standing. Now this church is abandoned, but with the excavations, you have a modern altar so pilgrims can still come and explore and even have a mass. And at the end of this hall, you even have the burial site of Cyrillus, one of the 2 Slavic saints who brought the remains of Clemens back to Rome in 896 and is buried right here. So now we're looking finally at San Clemente number 2, the church that still stands on top of the original construction. And the reason is that church was falling apart, and that church is attributed also to possibly being destroyed by the Norman sack of 1084. This is the new version, and it's constructed over the truncated earlier church. We have this wonderful portico with spoliated columns, and we have this facade of the 18th century. Walking inside, we're looking at a magnificent medieval church. And what we see here is beautiful apse of the 12th century and a cosmatesque floor, again with spoliated pieces of ancient marble and porphyry. What's brought up from the earlier church is the Scola Cantorum, this parapet wall made of marble. It dates to the 6th century, and it's now located in the second version of San Clemente. Always keeping in mind that the earlier San Clemente church was actually larger, taller than this very church. Look at those frescoes. Look at this gorgeous mosaic dating to the 12th century. And it's telling that story of Jesus whose blood drips down and then forms this wonderful acanthus plant inspired by the acanthus plants of the Corinthian order of pagan Rome. Of course, eventually we get this Baroque ceiling, gilded. We have a fresco cycle detailing the martyrdom of Clemens. So you're getting many, many layers in this medieval church, but it truly is a stunning experience to witness the culmination of the decoration of the second church of San Clemente, keeping in mind what lies beneath that church of the 5th century, and that in turn on top of a house and a warehouse going back to the end of the 1st century AD. What an extraordinary sight you must visit. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Ask me questions. Tell me what you want to see next. Let's explore Rome and Empire together.